Perfect. Okay, I'll tee up my screen
There we
again real
go.
fast.
Yep. I know.
All right, great. Well, I would be remiss before I get started in kind of providing an overview of the Teals study and why we're doing it if I did not mention our partners on this work. In addition to our team over at Ford Pinellas, we are working hand in glove with Pinellas County Economic Development as well as Pinellas County Housing and Community Development in conjunction with our primary consultant for this work, which is Renaissance Planning Group, and their sub-consultant for sort of economic policy research and analysis, which is SB Friedman. So just a little bit about who we are at Ford Pinellas, in case those of you, if there's anyone here who doesn't know sort of the ins and outs of what we do. We are a policy making and planning agency consisting of a merger between the Pinellas Planning Council, which works to help guide countywide growth and redevelopment through the administration and maintenance of our countywide plan, as well as the Pinellas County Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, which is primarily responsible for prioritizing countywide transportation projects for state and federal funds. And so why are we updating the Teals now here in 2022? So a little bit about what's led us here. Some of you may know Pinellas County is often what we refer to as a redeveloping county, which means that we have very limited vacant land for new development countywide. And those lands, those vacant lands that we do have, specifically those set aside for target employment and industrial uses, are vital components to the attraction and retention of target employers countywide. And given the vacant nature of these lands, historically, there's been a great deal of pressure put on these lands to convert to other uses, namely within the residential and commercial markets, just because those tend to have a quicker return on investment than some of the more traditional target employment or industrial uses. And this is nothing new. In fact, this is what led to the original Teals study back in 2008, which found that from about 2003 to 2006, roughly 264 acres of land that was set aside for industrial target employment use had converted to other uses, primarily within those residential and commercial categories. And that in order for Pinellas County to continue to remain sort of economically vital and vibrant moving forward, the study recommended that about 8,000 acres were needed to accommodate of industrial land was needed to accommodate about 182,000 jobs by 2025. However, at the time, only about 4,000 acres of vacant land was available to accommodate target employment uses. And so that led the Pinellas Planning Council at the time, now us at Ford Pinellas, to adopt a pretty strict preservation approach when it comes to the conversion of industrial lands countywide. And what I mean by a preservationist approach is essentially that barring special circumstances, we tend to not allow those uses, those industrial uses, to convert to other uses. And when we do evaluate employment or industrial lands converting to other uses, we typically put those against 5 key balancing criteria related to job density, site characteristics, characteristics of the area, infrastructure on the site, and consistency of the proposed change with other plans. In addition to the outcomes of the 2008 study, there was also the establishment of what we call target employment centers, or TECs. You can see those on the map to the right in that purple hatched pattern throughout the county. And these target employment centers are essentially areas of the county that are now developed or appropriate to be developed in a concentrated and cohesive pattern that help to facilitate employment uses that have countywide significance. Currently, about 13,000 acres are designated in that target employment center category, which constitutes about 7% of the county's land area. So where are we today, and why ultimately are we updating this study? Well, in 2020, Governor DeSantis approved a bill called House Bill 1339. And this would allow for residential uses to be built on vacant industrial lands, as long as the residential properties that were developed were 100% affordable, meaning the 100% of the units developed were for affordable housing purposes. However, more recently, there was the passage of Senate Bill 962, which has passed and is currently awaiting signature, which would allow for any residential to be developed on industrial land as long as at least 10% of the units that are built are deemed for affordable housing purposes. And that can be done regardless of countywide planning policy. In addition to this, the Penny for Pinellas Affordable Housing Program has unintentionally placed some pressure on these lands to convert to other uses just to help meet the targets established within that program. And we also understand that many target employment needs have changed since 2008, especially since the advent of COVID. So we're at a point where we almost feel as though target employment is sort of being pinned against affordable housing needs, and we don't want that. And so in order to sort of get ahead of that, we believe that it's time for an update to the Teals work. So some of the study objectives that we have for this is one, we want to be able to identify the need for employment in industrially designated land by target employers, those target employers that are here currently, those who may be considering coming here, and those who have considered coming here in the past but ultimately opted out. We want to know why that was. We want to identify changes to the countywide plan that could help support and incentivize the location, expansion, and retention of target employers throughout Pinellas County. And lastly, we also want to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of those preservationist policies that were adopted back in 2008 within the countywide plan to determine if essentially, have they been effective? Have they not been effective? Have some components been effective? And what do we need to do moving forward? And so throughout this presentation, throughout this work, any updates you may hear about it, you're going to hear me, as I already have throughout this, talk about target employment and industrial lands. And anytime we hear industrial lands, it can conjure up some ideas of, billowing smokestacks and that sort of thing. And that's really just not the case. When we're talking about target employment industrial land, we're talking about, and the uses that reside within these lands, we're talking about facilities such as CoreRx, Valpak, Jabil, Lockheed Martin. And this particular example that I included, I just thought was fascinating. This is actually a hydraulics manufacturing company that is utilizing industrial land. They're located behind the Carrabba's off Gulf to Bay, just across the street from the Clearwater Mall. You probably would not even know that there was an industrial use on that property or behind any of those facilities, but they are. So again, just want to ensure that we're not thinking of billowing smokestacks when we're talking about industrial lands. So now I'm just going to review some of the preliminary data. I do want to, that we've gotten at least up to this point. I do want to stress we do have quite a few analyses that we're still kind of working through with this work. Whit at our board meeting the other day said we're sort of still in the sausage making process, and that's true. We do still have a long ways to go before we sort of get to actual countywide policy recommendations. But I do just want to go over some of the preliminary data points with you all today. So here's just a breakdown of the jobs in Pinellas County. You can see the office and industrial categories sort of make the largest chunks of this pie. And those are really the concentrations that we're focused on the most as it relates to target employment in Pinellas County. And specifically, we're focused really on these key target industry clusters. These clusters consist of business services, financial services, information technology, medical technology and life sciences, microelectronics, aviation and defense, and marketing, design, and publishing. And so in addition to these industries, having a footprint in Pinellas County, a substantial footprint in Pinellas County, paying higher than average wages. What's particularly unique about these clusters of industries and why we're focusing on them is that they are also export oriented, which means that they are bringing money back into Pinellas County and ultimately contributing to the gross regional product of the county as a whole. And so that's a lot of what this bar graph sort of breaks down is sort of the contribution that each of these industries have to the overall gross regional product growth within Pinellas County from 2012 through 2020. You can see these numbers reflected to the tunes of billions of dollars. And you can also see sort of the breakdown of how these industries have grown over time throughout Pinellas, with business services sort of being at the top, followed by financial services, information technology, and so on and so forth. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, what is business services? How does something like this differ than, say, a financial services? And when we're talking about business services, it can be a range of anything from corporate headquarters and holding companies that are here in Pinellas, as well as any professional technical services, such as your engineering consulting, architecture consulting, HR consulting, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what the makeup is of that cluster specifically. And here's sort of a breakdown of the average wages that these employers typically pay in Pinellas. And so while some of the other primary clusters might hover around the $58,000 a year range, these target industries typically pay around $86,000 annually, which is nearly double the established living wage for Pinellas County. And this is just a breakdown of some of how these industries are clustered throughout the county, and just some of the differences between them. So for aviation, defense businesses, as well as microelectronics, you can see a lot of these larger employers, or the majority of them are clustered within a target employment center, the larger ones being primarily located within Gateway. But when we shift over to the business services and financial services categories, there's a lot more variation here, just kind of given the building typologies and structures that they might need for these types of services. There's a little bit more variation and flexibility. And so for business services and financial services, we can see a lot more spread throughout the county. However, you will still notice that a lot of them are clustered either within a target employment center or again within the Gateway area. So some of the trends that we've seen up to this point, industrial acreage has actually still been on a steady decline since the last study. But overall, industrial employment has increased countywide by about 12%. About 77% of industrial land is within a target employment center, and that those parcels that are within those TECs are typically less likely to convert to other uses. In addition to these preliminary findings, we also did work on a target employer survey. We had it sent by WIT as well as Dr. Cynthia Johnson with Pinellas County Economic Development. I should also specify WIT Blanton, our executive director. We had it sent through him. Throughout this survey, we did have a specific key list that was provided to us by Pinellas County Economic Development, a list of folks to reach out to. We were hoping to get about 20% of responses. We actually only got about 9%. This is not uncommon. There's a lot of survey fatigue right now, especially in the post-COVID era. So to help supplement this, SB Friedman, again, our primary or the sub-consultant to our primary consultant who really specializes in our sort of economic policy research, our economic analysis, that sort of thing. They're going to be doing more targeted calls specifically to some of these key target industries throughout Pinellas County to hopefully not only answer a lot of the survey questions that we asked, but also get some kind of more nuanced views on a bit of what we asked in the survey. With all of that said, in terms of what we did receive from survey responses, we got about 56% of respondents cited a lack of affordable housing as a challenge to attracting and retaining employees. This was followed by a high cost of living at 48%, followed by wage competition from peer communities at 45%. So these are sort of the top three issues and challenges that came through in this survey pretty repeatedly as being a challenge that these industries are facing. In addition to this, there was also a lack of reliable public transit options and long commute times were cited. But with all of that said, many of the respondents did also indicate that they were actually looking to expand their operations within Pinellas County. But again, the challenges that we hear really coming through, at least from this preliminary survey, continues to remain focused around affordability.
Hey, Jared, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So in Oldsmar, we've had some situations with, lack of housing, and in this 56% for affordable housing, was there any consideration, because we've kind of used two terms, affordable housing, but also workforce housing?
Right.
Are those one and the same in this particular 56%, or is that truly affordable housing?
Yeah, I think when we've noticed that when we talk about this, yeah, there is confusion around the terms in terms of affordable housing and housing that is affordable, and I think that's more what respondents are indicating here is a lack of housing that is affordable for their employees in terms of retaining those employees rather than more specific like public housing options or something like that.
Okay.
But one thing I will say too about this survey, our consultants are working hard to get sort of an overview, sort of one pager, if you will, on sort of the story that we're hearing throughout the survey results, as well as from what we hear from those one-on-one calls with those target employers. When we have that information, I can certainly send that out to you all so that you have a clearer picture of sort of what we're hearing from these folks.
Awesome.
Excuse me. All right. In addition to all of this, we also have formed a Teals advisory committee. It consists of roughly 50 members. It's pretty distributed amongst local government staff, elected official, and private sector stakeholders. We want this group to sort of help at key intervals throughout the study, sort of help guide and provide feedback on sort of where we're headed throughout this. The next meeting that we have is on June 29th. And we have some Upper Tampa Bay Chamber representation, namely you, Mr. Beavis. We have sent that invite out to you. Please let me know if you haven't received it or if there's someone else from the chamber you think should be on that committee. But we do really stress the importance of having some Upper Tampa Bay Chamber representation on that meeting, because this, again, advisory committee is going to really help kind of steer this work. We've already had a sort of initial kickoff meeting that really just kind of does what I'm doing today, which is sort of providing an overview of the study. But that first key meeting is on June 29th. There will be another meeting on August 9th as well. And then we'll have a final meeting in September around the time that the study wraps up. We're still working out that September date, but nonetheless, I just did want to bring that to everyone's attention. So this is just a sort of upcoming timeline of the study. Again, we're really still in that sort of sifting through all the data, finishing up analyses, that kind of thing, trying to really figure out what is the story here, what has been going on, where are we headed, that sort of thing. Once we're finished with that, we aim to move into sort of an evaluation, again, as I mentioned earlier, that preservation criteria. And then by the time we get to that August, September timeframe, we're going to have those real, policy recommendations that will ultimately impact the countywide plan and how we approach target employment lands moving forward. So that's just kind of a high level overview. This is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out at any time if you have any questions about this work. If you want a status update, whatever the case may be, I do just want to ensure that you all have my number, my email, and what have you. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you may have of me at this time.
Just a quick question. When you're talking about that additional land for that you're targeting for the industrial space, are you looking at also repurposing existing properties or repurposing land that has kind of fallen off that's not being utilized, or is it just got to be vacant land?
No, certainly. Again, we sort of have to take that into consideration because of the fact that we're redeveloping county. We just, or in more plain terms, we're built out. We have very limited vacant land available. So it's not just a matter of setting vacant land aside and sort of hoping that the target employers will come. But we're also looking at potentially having sort of a tiered approach to this, which is, here's the core industrial lands we need to preserve. Here's some of the lands that, with the right incentives, redevelopment, sort of attention put on them could then move into that category. And then here are sort of the parcels that we would allow sort of a more flex of uses with moving forward. So not sure if that answers your question, but
yeah. What type of incentives are offered to these organizations for them to move their organizations to Pinellas County?
That we're not, I don't have a clear answer for you currently. That's more of a question for Pinellas County Economic Development, but I can certainly follow up with them on that. I know that as part of this work, once the Teals study has been completed, they aim to kind of wrap this into a economic development visioning strategy for the county. To help sort of sift through exactly that question, is what sort of incentives, attractors, that kind of thing need to be provided based on what we hear from the Teals study.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is that a question?
I just have a general comment. It's Felicia Donnelly talking. I don't know if you guys, oh, there I am. So Jared, I thank you very much for your presentation. I really applaud Ford Pinellas for looking at this. And I think SB Friedman, I have a high amount of respect for their research and their data in this field. And I think it's an interesting conversation that I see Pinellas having for a while. The new legislation that, allows and really promotes the building of affordable housing over the employment centers is an odd, there are different ends, in a perfect world, we want to create more opportunities for people to work so they don't have to have affordable housing.
Right.
Right. So I think that the preservation policies, I think from my perspective, have been very effective, right? Because having an employment overlay that makes it difficult for people to change their land use designation to residential commercial certainly has kept Oldsmar in a very prosperous financial sustainable position. And so, I look forward to seeing what we can do at a countywide level to still retain that under the new framework of the legislation that came through that said you can build residential housing if it's 100% affordable housing, not housing that's affordable, and to see how that is kind of reconciled in the policy world.
Right.
So this is not an easy task.
Yeah.
And
right.
one that is extremely important for Pinellas County's viability.
Right. Yeah, and what we've seen, when this legislation was passed, Pinellas County was really the only. We're the only voice sort of saying, hey, let's kind of maybe reconsider this, because again, we're one of the, we're the most developed county in the state of Florida, so it poses particular challenges to our county specifically. That said, what we're hoping is that the Teals work will help inform the locals' decisions as in terms of how they approach target employment lands and the sort of House Bill 1339, Senate Bill 962 legislation. Luckily, we do have a great relationship with all of our locals, and many are waiting for this work before they sort of set their own policies. So we do appreciate that. Yes.
Jared, Dave Eggers, just for clarification, maybe a little for me, but for anybody else who might be listening. So the issues that were raised in 1339 and are further contemplated, I guess, this year in the 962, it really goes to the comp plan control, if you will, by the county, the overall comp plan. But beyond that, that people that want to develop or change industrial land, because in each city and in the county itself, we have lands that are designated either land use or zoning, still protective of our industrial. So even if developers can ignore the comp plan, they have to come to the city of Oldsmar, for example, and say, hey, you've got this industrial land that we would like to change the land use and change the zoning. And that's still within the control of the cities and the unincorporated county. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That is a great point. So even if, yes, as you said, say a local government, like I'll use the city of St. Petersburg as an example, because they've actually they've been the only ones to actually adopt the House Bill 1339 rules. The city of St. Pete still sets their own thresholds. So they determine what, for instance, industrial land they will allow to convert and which industrial lands they will not allow to convert. And in terms of the Senate Bill 962, if they were to say they wanted to keep the House Bill 1339 rules and regulations in place to say you can't develop affordable housing on residential unless it's 100% affordable housing, they can absolutely still do that. They set the thresholds as the local government. It just would not have to come to us if they were to change that industrial land. And so that's what we're really, the Teals study is going to help serve as sort of a, obviously it'll set the countywide planning policy, but we hope that it will also serve as sort of a best practices too, in terms of how the locals will approach this moving forward, so that we have a clear picture as to what is the countywide impact of allowing these lands to convert.
And Austin, to that point, I think in North St. Petersburg, there was a piece of land that I think a business wanted to convert 25% of it to some kind of housing affordability, but they kept the rest of it light industrial, for instance. That was their game plan. The city of St. Petersburg, in their planning procedure, thought that was an effective use. In other words, let's keep most of it. Let's keep, I think it was 75 or 80% industrial, and then carved out a piece for land for housing that's affordable. And so this effort that you guys are doing is just so critically important. So thank you for that work.
And I just wanted to add too, so just for the people on this call, is that this year is we're just embarking on a complete update of our comprehensive plan. So we'll have that work done by August of 23. And so the timing for this is very good for us, because this is a huge topic for Oldsmar.
And I'll ask this question, and I don't know if there's an answer to it yet, but for us, let's talk about Oldsmar. What potentially does this mean for Oldsmar, this study and the changes that could be coming? What would we see here?
Well, we'll see that.
Oh no,
we'll
go ahead,
see
Felicia.
that. Yeah, we'll see that when we're doing our comp plan, right? So our comprehensive plan, for the people who may not be familiar in this area, is really sets the vision for our community, and it sets, what you can do within certain allowable land uses. And so for that gives us the ability to try to balance this, right? Because it's the need for housing and we need both.
Right.
It's not like one can be exclusive of the other, they work together. Mm-hmm. So that allows us to take current data and then to incorporate that into our policy decisions, which really shape the way our future is. And we've had those conversations in the last year about where density, where that, where you allow appropriate density and where, so that really you can balance both these uses, because they're not, as again, in my mind, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right. No, and that's a great point. And, to Oldsmar specifically, I mean, Oldsmar is a particularly, focal point, in this study, in the sense that, you have a lot of key clusters of these target industries that we're talking about present there. In addition to that, that land that the Oldsmar flea market's on, that's been talked about for some time now, that's industrial land, and it's right off 580, and it's surrounded by these clusters of target industries. So all of this is going to help, what we hope the Teals work, the analysis that's done, the story that's told, we hope will help tie back into these local communities like Oldsmar, like Dunedin, like City of St. Pete, and Largo, and so on. So we think it's pertinent for sure.
And I guess, having been on the Ford Pinellas board, and same with Commissioner Eggers and all this, I don't remember the study, what all it covered that you talked about, but Just transportation and the ease of transportation still continue to be an Achilles heel for us when we're trying to attract all these industries?
It's definitely come through in our survey, at least that we've done thus far, that it is a challenge. Those long commute times, the lack of transit options, that wasn't as high as affordability, but it was definitely on there. So.
Okay. How do we compare maybe to say, and they have their own growth problems, Pasco County, because I know we keep losing a lot of businesses to Pasco County. However, they financially are struggling with infrastructure, problems, water, sewer. The sheriff turned over the jail back to the county up there because the funding wasn't there. I mean, that used to be, the place to go, but I think they're having their own struggles up there as well.
Yeah. So, funny you should say that. Pasco County is actually undergoing their own similar sort of Teals study, if you will. It has a different name, but they are undertaking that. I have been in contact with the project manager with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, who handled that study for them. Pasco is a particularly unique case because they're kind of where Pinellas was back in that 2003-2006 timeframe, and that they're now just sort of evaluating, hey, do we need to establish a target employment center over these contiguous parcels of industrial land, because they're a community that is 70% residential. The commute times are very, very high for the folks there, because many of them are exiting to Hillsborough and Pinellas. In fact, there's a table, I didn't include it in my presentation, but it makes Pinellas look real good in terms of our commute times compared to some of the challenges they're facing. A lot of their industrial parcels that they would like to preserve for target employment lands have very, very, very old industrial facilities on them that would require an extensive amount of rehabilitation to make them more attractive. So they have a lot to evaluate moving forward. And again, they're kind of where we were some time ago in terms of the preservation mindset of how they might approach target employment land, especially in the advent of this new legislation. But with that said, we are working with TBRPC as well. They did a really interesting analysis for Pasco in terms of actually measuring the monetary impact of converting an industrial parcel to something like a residential or commercial use, and what that impact looks like over time throughout their county. We are actually taking a different approach. We're going to have it more focused on, they're doing a similar analysis for us, but we're taking a more nuanced approach. We don't want to just look at what is a specific industrial parcel cost when it converts. We want to know, what does an industrial parcel that is being used specifically for one of our target industries, what is the financial impact of that converting to another use? So that'll be another complementary component to our work.
I'd love to get a copy of that chart if you had it available at some point. That would be great.
Yeah, I can send you that.
And I think Commissioner Eggers made reference, I think Hernando is to Pasco what Pasco used to be to Pinellas at one point. So just keep pushing the problem out a little bit, but hopefully we'll get the answers.
Jared, this is Jerry Custon. What is the agency in Pasco County that is a partner to you with Ford Pinellas? What's the name of that?
Well, the agency that ran their study is the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, but the, I guess, equivalent. So we have a merger between a planning council and MPO. Their entities are separate. I believe it was their countywide planning authority that undertook the Pasco industrial land study, but I can get more information for that regarding that.
Yeah, I'd like to have that. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? I love it. I love data.
Hey, Jared. Hey guys. Hey, Jared. This is James Poulter. I'm with the Chichi Rodriguez Foundation, but I'm also the current chair for the chamber. So thanks for taking the time this morning. In regards to the group that you're getting together, I know Doug was invited. What's the time commitment on that? And is it virtual? Is it in person?
Those meetings are in person. They'll be held at the Epicenter. At least the first 2 meetings that we have blocked off for now will be held at the Epicenter in Clearwater, the SBCS Epicenter. The time commitment is an hour and a half. It's from 1 to 2:30 p.m. It'll be on June 29th. And then the other one is August 9th, both at the same time, 1 to 2:30 p.m. We do have to limit sort of the membership of that, but you know, we do want to ensure that we have Upper Tampa Bay Chamber representation on that committee. So.
Are you planning on going to that, Doug?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Jared, who would I have received the email from? I just want to make sure that I didn't overlook it.
It was probably forwarded to you from Tina. I can double check.
Okay.
I can resend you the invite. Honestly, I have your email, so yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
I have it on, I'll put it on my calendar anyway, but yeah, that
Perfect.
sounds great. Anything else? I think it's great. You know, what do you, and I don't know if this is answerable, but with what you're seeing so far, because the end is somewhat near August, September, what are you seeing that the recommendations might be? Or is it too early to kind of guess on that?
It's probably a little too early to tell. I can give you some insight in that one of the things we're finding is that, you know, not all industrial land is equal in terms of the attraction and retainment of target employers. So there may be some parcels we have to think of a little bit differently. Again, kind of having that tiering approach, perhaps. Again, this is all hypothetical.
Sure.
But having a tiering approach, again, where you have those sort of core areas that are preserved for target employment uses, we don't let those convert, or we try to encourage them not to convert. And then maybe some that are ripe to be in that category, but need a little bit of improvement. And then some that might be better suited for reflexive uses. So an example I can give, you know, Commissioner Eggers had mentioned that area in St. Petersburg that they were thinking about maybe allowing some kind of industrial mixed use category on. That's what he was referencing was a area within what's called the Warehouse Arts District in St. Petersburg. That's it's under a target employment center. It's industrial land, but the majority of uses there are like art warehousing, art galleries, and that sort of thing. And it's not really what we're trying to secure in terms of target employment uses. And so those might be areas that we allow, you know, to have those art uses, but also, you know, a residential component or something along those lines. But again, we're still really in that early process.
Hey, Jared,
Yes.
This is Dave again. I was specifically thinking of the Jable property.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that carved out some of their industrial land for some residential.
Right, and that particular instance is what led to Senate Bill 962. If I'm just being honest, because we voted to deny that land use change. And the reason for that is because, again, that was previously a target employment parcel. They wanted to build a residential component, but the sort of employment side of it was seasonal. It wasn't, again, one of those key target employment uses. So that did lead to kind of a broader impact to the county as a whole. So
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I'm gonna get with Whit because I think I'd like to do this more regularly and get some information. I think it's really important to not only Oldsmar, but to our businesses here and things like that, to kind of know what's going on, and that, you know, we're not all in a vacuum. Sometimes we are communicating with other agencies and things like that. So
absolutely, and I'm happy to come back and present as we get periodic updates. Just let me know.
Yeah, that would be great. Any other comments or questions from anybody in the room?
Can we get a copy of the slides?
Yes, I can send slides.
Would I be able to get a copy of the slide? Be great.
Yeah, that would be, if you want to send it to me, I can get it out to everybody, and and I'll just make sure I have their email, because I think slides are great, but they go so fast, you can't, you know, you can't write everything down. So that would be great.
Yeah, great job.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll be in touch for sure.
Great. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks.